2 weeks ago, Port City, a girl is walking with flowers and hears her friends calling her. They happen to be on the same street and of course couldn't pass by. They ask why Veronica is coming home and what are those very beautiful flowers she has. The girl replies that she just decided to come back early today, although she didn't think it would work out that way. It was only after a while that the friends remembered that today was her birthday, and also that this day was especially important because it was the first birthday when Veronica became an adult, so they had an idea to celebrate and have a good time. They don't even want to hear refusals. They started to drag her by the hand and promised that this day she will remember for a long time. Veronica started to resist because she has some things to do and she doesn't know how to combine it all. She is, of course, very glad that her friends suggested this idea, but for this, she will have to adjust her plans. The thing is, her father is already waiting for her at the church, and it would be wrong for her to go out with them instead of fulfilling her promise. She has a very difficult choice to make, so she needs to think it through. In the end, she decided that she would do everything one by one, and since she had promised her father earlier, her friend promised that she would definitely come later, since it was better not to upset her father. And besides, it was possible to meet her friends at any other time. At first, of course, they were very upset, and even you thought that the friend is deceiving, but then reconciled and thought about what to do, because they have a day off today, and there is still a whole day ahead of them. It turns out they didn't just think that because they were offended. Everyone knows very well that Veronica doesn't have a very good relationship with her father. He literally hates her. They say that ever since her mother died, he spends all his free time in church. It is strange for them that the girl still walks and smiles, as if nothing has happened. And in fact, they even feel a little sorry for her. In their opinion, it looks like Veronica is trying to get love from someone, since her parents didn't give it to her. They have long noticed that she clearly lacks care and love from anyone. The girl is constantly trying to communicate with someone, just to not feel lonely. She approaches even strangers and asks how they are doing, and also can chat about the weather. After that, she went up to some auntie and she asked her what kind of flowers she had. They were very colorful and attracted attention even across the street. Veronica said that these were her mother's favorite flowers, and that her father must like them too. The woman reacted as if she didn't understand why the girl was doing this, and whether she was going to give these flowers to her father. She was outraged at what she found good in this man, so she advised her not to please her father, but to get married, and quickly. At some point during the conversation, Veronica heard two men standing next to each other discussing some kind of red eyes, looking into which you can faint, and some even can't stand it and die. The girl asked what they were talking about, and the woman said that they were probably talking about the Bahamut monster again. She said there was nothing threatening this village, but they were still panicking and spreading rumors. The girl immediately realized what monster we are talking about. She has heard a lot about it, and in fact believes that everything is not as safe as others think, because no one knows how close the monster can be at any moment. Maybe he is on the way, and no one even knows about it. To listen to such horror stories, an unpleasant feeling, she really hopes that today will only be good. Then she came home, and when she said hello to her father, he ignored her, and as usual, pretended that no one else was here but him. He acted as if she were a stranger to him. At first, she was very offended, but now it was nothing unusual. She's just used to it. And despite his behavior, even offers to go to church together, which means that she deceived her friends. And in fact, he didn't demand anything from her. She herself wanted to suggest the idea to him to improve the relationship a little bit. And also, she is constantly trying to smile at him, to help with household chores, and also tells him how her day was, pretending that he is interested. But still, deep down, she feels that there is no point in this for a long time. He will never change his attitude to her, and even if I change this one, then clearly not for the better. Veronica often reassures herself and thinks that since it's her birthday, maybe he will pay attention to her, at least on this day once a year. She does not stop believing and deceiving herself that if she waits, something good will happen, and there will be warm relations in this house, which disappeared immediately after the death of her mother. In the meantime, since her father didn't agree to go to church together, Veronica decided to follow him, but she came a few minutes later so that he wouldn't notice anything. And also, there is a feeling that today the church is especially quiet. Usually there are a lot of people and noise. She goes in and tries to find her father, as suddenly, she sees in front of her what is impossible to react normally. Such a picture causes not the most pleasant feelings. In addition, everywhere is a very pungent and unpleasant smell. She did not even hold back and dropped the bouquet of flowers. The girl did not notice how it fell out of her hands, because everything around much more takes her attention than these flowers. She literally lost the power of speech and does not understand what it means. There's red stains everywhere, a terrible smell and complete silence, but that's not all. That's not the worst part. She saw dozens of dead people that looked like they were trying to clean up somewhere, but they didn't succeed. It looked incredibly grim, as if some monster had been here. It's unlikely that these people were so bad to each other that they had wiped out every last one of them. Even though it's really impossible to stay here for long, she needs to find out if her father is among these people. Because if what she thinks happened is what she thinks happened, it's just awful. If someone else were to look at this situation now, that person would obviously be outraged. Because how can you worry about a person who doesn't even pay attention to her? And if it were him, he wouldn't care if his daughter was among those people. In the end, the thing she wanted least happened. She found her father among these people after all, and she couldn't believe it. She had hoped that now he would regain consciousness and everything would be all right. The girl has no idea who did this to him, and especially for what of course he was disliked by many, but that doesn't mean you have to get rid of those who dislike someone or said a hurtful word. She sits beside him in complete silence, as suddenly, she feels that someone is touching her back, and these hands, even by sensation, are so huge that this creature can only be a monster, but this is only a temporary thought, which she would like very much not to become reality. Otherwise, it can be considered that now she can become one of these people, and very quickly. Veronica turns around and realizes that it's exactly what she just thought. She's speechless, her body is frozen, and as if it stopped obeying her. It's unbelievable. It's the same monster that two friends were discussing on the street this morning. The girl remembered what they said about the red eyes, and just as she thought, it was much closer than people thought. She wanted to scream very loudly, but at the same time, she just couldn't do it. She just didn't have the strength for it. Especially, she had no idea what this monster was capable of. How strong, crazy, and fast it was. It seemed like there was no point in even thinking about trying to escape from it. This is the one, the Bahamut monster. The locals are sure that he is very far away, and the village is completely protected. And even if he tries to attack, they will be able to defeat him and prevent him from coming even a kilometer away. Surprisingly, it doesn't look at all like the others make it out to be. But at the same time, it's huge, and it really does feel awful. Veronica is trapped, and it's unlikely that anyone, even if they see her here, will dare to help her. It's impossible to imagine what would have to happen for the girl to survive in the end, or to tell others to save the village. And also, since no one has seen him yet, it means that no one has been warned, and there will be more and more of these cases. The only word she was able to utter, and it wasn't the first time, "Save me," it was like a dream. The girl couldn't even fully realize that if she had just stayed with her friends this morning, everything could have been different. After a while, some guy comes to this building. Apparently, he was in a hurry to get here, and maybe he heard her request. Or maybe the monster was seen by someone else, and the guards have already started to deal with the case, as it usually happens. Everyone started to look around the area. And surprisingly, according to what he said, she's one of the survivors. I don't know where he got that from, because the guy's just standing there. He hasn't even heard a single sound from her. Then he just started looking at her and waiting for her to move. Then Veronica opens her eyes and still can't tell if she's safe or not, except her eyes are red now. She just looked in his direction and probably doesn't even realize who she is from this second on and how the guy will react to it. There are so many questions that arise, but it seems the answers won't come soon enough. It turns out that before this guy came into this room, Veronica had a dream that she became a monster, and everyone started running away from her. At first, it seemed to her that everything was real, but then everything became blurred, as if in a fog. Even her friends, with whom she had a good relationship, perceived her as an enemy. The girl saw dozens of frightened looks, and until the last moment could not understand what was happening. Moreover, when everyone was running away, she noticed the hateful looks. She literally felt like a monster that everyone feared. But she couldn't even think that it wasn't just a dream or a dream. It was literally a warning before what awaited her in real life. The streets were becoming chaotic by the second. Less and less people were around, all because they were just hiding from her. And those who were too close to her were mostly passing out. It looked horrible. When she asked them not to leave and to explain why they were so afraid of her, she caught surprised looks and never understood anything. Only the moment a guy called her a monster, she of course had the thought to look at herself in the mirror, but after a minute she stopped thinking about it. It's very interesting what that monster did to her that Veronica survived, but her eyes changed color and were not just a different color. They are now the same color as his. Meanwhile, she's starting to regain consciousness, and it's the moment when the guy is about to see her new eye color. Only after she was thirsty, and Veronica recognized the red liquid on the floor as water did he realize it. And surprisingly, he didn't run away. He began to explain that she was now connected to the monster. The girl started to ask who he was and asked him to let go, for she was very thirsty, and he wouldn't let her. She reached for the same red color again. And he, in turn, explained that even if she drank the liquid, nothing would change. She would still want a drink of water. And the worst thing that can happen to her after that is her body will literally shatter into little pieces, but only if she actually does it. It's strange why he's protecting her and trying to help her. The guy looks like a guard or a local, but his actions say something different. He's like her attendant and helper, who can advise and tell her what she can do to hurt herself, and what, on the contrary, can ease her suffering. And then he asked her an even stranger question. Would she want to survive even after having to go through the hellfire? It's unclear why he needed that information, but it seems like he can be trusted. After that, since he realizes that the girl probably doesn't really want to stay in this body and feel like a monster for the rest of her life, so he offered the option. If she asked, he could destroy her without pain. It was at this point that she wondered if she wanted to move on, because it was still unclear what changes she had undergone and what was happening, who she had become, whether she would be able to socialize with her friends, and how it would affect her life. After a short time of thinking, she made up her mind and answered that she wanted to move on with her life and asked not to ask the question again, no matter what. She wants to live in this world, even if she has to face difficulties. She knows one thing. It is too early to die because everything can be solved. The girl is used to patience, so it is not difficult. She will do everything possible, so that even after this, someday she will feel happy as never before. After that, the guy started touching her hair in a way that made it seem like he had more news to deal with. Every minute, he starts to let himself go more and more. He hugs her like they've known each other for a long time. In the end, he spent it with the rebirth into a monster and told that before, when people were in the same situation, more often than not, they agreed to his proposal and died without feeling any pain. No one wanted to live in this body further and spoil the lives of people who had done nothing wrong. How suddenly he even kissed her. And it was at that moment that she must have felt less and less like drinking water. She doesn't understand how it's related, but it is. Veronica does not understand how to treat him and who he is in general, and most importantly, what awaits her now. Most likely, he will tell everything, but gradually, and also, the guy is the only one who has information that is very eager to know. She herself would deal with it for a very long time and would think that it is a dream. It's very much like the beginning of a romantic story that every girl dreams of. Maybe not exactly like this, but there's definitely romance here. After the kiss and how she didn't feel like drinking water, she probably asked him how he did it and asked him to tell her something else. He clearly had something to surprise her with. The girl is ready for this information and realizes that everything will sound very unfamiliar and fantastic. But now she trusts him and does not doubt a word of it. To which the guy replied that just now he had saved her, and as a result she had become a monster. Though so far not even resembling him outwardly, and since time was short, he asked her to listen to him attentively. He said that the girl had merged with a monster called Bahamut, and a man who merges with a monster perishes unless he has holy power. Veronica doesn't understand what they're talking about and asks for a different explanation. Suddenly, she remembers that she recently went to look for her father, saw him die, and then everything began. He stopped her at once and asked her not to be distracted by unnecessary thoughts, because it was very important now. Every minute counted. He's trying to do everything possible so she's not afraid of anything, especially when he's around her. The guy asked that from now on, she listen to him unconditionally, in all situations, even if she doesn't agree and thinks it's a mistake. In the meantime, they heard some voices from the street, and Veronica immediately stopped asking questions and agreed to any request as long as she was all right. People say they're not criminals, but some person asks someone to shut up until everything is checked out. The guy listened to all of this and started acting like their main mission was to hide from these people. The street is full of knights, guards, all looking for survivors, and the chief has ordered that no one be released until the case is over. Deputy Commander Philip von, Deputy Commander of the Holy Order. He's one of the main ones, and it seems they're looking for Veronica specifically. The subordinate asks what to do if they find the person who merged with the monster. So, it's about Veronica. Now it's clear what the guy was talking about and why she should listen to him. If it wasn't for him, she would have been out on the street long ago and found. Her rescuer heard that notice whether the commander was saying that the man who merged with the monster was a traitor who needed to be neutralized immediately. And also, they decided to destroy this traitor right on the spot as soon as they found him, without explaining anything. And moreover, they are not going to give her a second chance or agree on anything. Veronica heard this and realized that she really has no other option, and she also needs to make sure that no one sees her eye color, because it will tell everything. Her life now literally depends on how much she will be able to hide from this guy too. At the very least, he knows a lot more than she does and understands what to do in these situations. He says they're in trouble, but that doesn't mean you have to accept it and sit in one place waiting for new enemies to come in. In that case, he would just silently gather her in his arms and ask her not to make too much noise, although Veronica had just wanted to ask why he was helping her at all, and what interest he had in doing so. The girl doesn't fully realize the situation and even starts screaming. The guy barely restrained himself and asked her to close her eyes and keep quiet from now on. Otherwise, he will leave her right there, and she will stay with them without help. At the very last moment, when people had already looked around and hadn't found any other survivors, they decided to check the church, as it was the only place they hadn't entered yet. At that moment, the deputy commander hears someone saying that no one is there, and Veronica's rescuer comes up to him, holds her in his arms, and tells him that he found no one there. The deputy commander said hello to him, and it turns out that the savior's name is Sir Berg. They have not seen each other for a long time, and of course passing by is not possible. It was necessary to say hello, so as not to attract unnecessary attention. And then, Berg pretended he didn't know anything and asked who all these people were, to which the guy replied that they were survivors in this town. According to him, it was a procedure to see if any of them had merged with the monster, and then he told the guy to ignore it. It turns out that until the moment he is standing here, everything depends only on whether or not the deputy commander will see the red eyes of the girl. And also, the savior himself may have even more problems, because if it turns out that he is with her, he will regret very much. In the meantime, he asked who the girl was and if she was alive at all. That was the main point that would decide everything. Now he had to use his imagination and dexterity. Eventually he had. When he managed to evade the question and even move away to a safe place, it was evening, and the guy made sure he had somewhere to stay. If it might have seemed that all the most interesting things were over, it was not so. During the conversation with the deputy, the girl found out what the name of this fellow was. Berg. She knew the name very well, and indeed, it was difficult to find a person who might not know it. He is the one who is supposed to protect the village from monsters, except that his actions are very different from what he is. If he has such a mission, There was nothing stopping him from getting rid of the girl the moment he saw her, especially after making sure she had red eyes. Now she had even more questions and fears that he might be an enemy like everyone else. Veronica began to look at him from all angles, but she still didn't understand what he saved her for. It contradicted his activities. Then, to make sure she had fewer questions, Berg asked if she knew so much. He asked her to tell him what she knew about the Bahamut monster. Bahamut, as everyone knows, is a demon, a devil, a monster who suddenly appeared in the world one day. He is ruthless and destroys everyone in his path. And it is also commonly believed that perhaps this is God's punishment for human arrogance. Some have been convinced of this more than once, for more often than not he attacks those who do have such qualities. Earlier, during conversations with friends, the girl had heard that this scourge had befallen the southern inhabitants, and that the holy knights were still holding back the monster, and some thought it was impossible. People explained that they live in a beautiful city that God loves, so it's safe. And that's why everyone was so sure that the monster would never come through here. But unfortunately, the city's completely under attack. Everything's destroyed everywhere, like after some hurricane or something. Veronica had the idea that if God had allowed this monster to come to them, it was a betrayal on his part, which she didn't want to believe. Meanwhile, the guy had already made sure to light a small fire and keep warm so it wouldn't be cold tonight. And to make the girl understand a little better what was going on, he told her that Bahamut had a rare likelihood of spawning merged with a monster. And if a man has no holy power, he merges with Bahamut. His mind unites with the beast, and soon he becomes insane and perishes. To survive, you have to constantly replenish your holy power. And it turns out, according to the guy, the fact that the girl still lived, it's because he, the guy, did not have time to finish his sentence, as Veronica interrupted him and began to ask him what he had done. To which he replied that it was very simple. She had asked him to save her, so since he had to do it, of course he didn't refuse. And then he no longer talked quietly as before, and confessed that he had one purpose, and that, since they were together now, Veronica could help him, namely to put an end to this calamity, for that was what he needed her for. Otherwise, there would be no point in saving her. The girl doesn't understand what it means. She asked him again to explain in simple words, because she can't decipher these hints. She hasn't had time to get over what happened, and he keeps complicating things, as if he can't speak in simple words. At this point, she decided to warn him and told him that up to this moment and in her entire life, she had never held a sword in her hands, much less tried to fight anyone. She was far from it, so she asked him not to count on her too much. Veronica doesn't understand how she can be useful to him, because at least she is not very strong and can't cope with any opponent. But suddenly, he replies that if she listened to him carefully, she could understand that he doesn't demand anything from her, especially something big and impossible. All she has to do is just do what he says. He promised that he will not give her any difficult tasks and will try to do everything himself. In the meantime, it was time to discuss something really important. For starters, Berg told me that Bahamut multiplies. And the worst part is that it needs to kill at least one person a day to do so. Once it has eaten one city, it moves on to the next, and so on, ad infinitum, and then take over the whole country. The only hope then that if you destroy one monster, then his offspring also dies. But in this, no one is not sure. Such experiments for all time to conduct, not been able to for obvious reasons. In fact, using this information, the guy has long ago come to one hypothesis and still does not stop thinking about it. Perhaps all the monsters that swept the southern continent come from one. Then if they find and destroy that first one, all problems will stop. And maybe that is the solution to the problem. After a little thinking, Veronica still did not understand what this has to do with her. She has no idea what he needs her for, because she has no powers, no knowledge, nothing that could theoretically help him. Therefore, she is very interested to know what exactly her duties are and what he will require from her. To which he replies that she said earlier that she knows what the monster looks like, after which she survived and was not harmed in any way. This is what he really wants to know. And in as much detail as possible, and of course explained how important it is, he must know his enemy by sight. because he demanded this information very suddenly. At first, Veronica seemed to lose it all from her memory, and then she was still able to say that he had no head, and in the center on his body, there was a kind of red eye that seemed to absorb all the energy that existed or appeared around him. And then, she remembers that monster and realizes that on the one hand, she saw them without heads, but on the other hand, the one that almost attacked her, it was the one that had a head. She remembers it very accurately and is not mistaken. She tells this to her partner, and he says it's a very good thing. In his opinion, this monster she saw is the first Bahamut he needs to see. Accordingly, if his hypothesis is correct, Veronica, the only person connected with this first. And finally, he did tell her what her duties would be and what she would have to do. It was actually very easy and even simpler than she had imagined. All he was getting from her was for her to go with him and tell him about the visions she had seen, and she wouldn't even have to hold the sword in her hands. It's very favorable for her, but for some reason, Veronica still has doubts. She asked if he needs her just as a tool, although it's a very strange question. After he saved her, she is obliged to do everything he says and not to ask such strange questions. Everything was very simple and easy from the beginning. Veronica was not only lucky to survive, but also to meet this guy. He not only didn't betray her, but asked for help in return, which doesn't require any effort, and in the end, they are able to destroy the monster and live happily ever after. All the main work he takes care of. And as he said, it's really very good conditions for her. The guy doesn't understand why she's hesitating and tries to pretend he still has the patience to wait for her to finally agree. How suddenly she needed proof that she had indeed contacted the first monster. Supposedly without that, she couldn't trust him, especially given the fact that he was Leon Berg. Leon Berg, a man who entered the Holy Order as a commoner, not a nobleman. He received the sacred sword at a very young age and became a consummate knight. But he let down absolutely everyone and anyone who trusted him by running away from the most dangerous place where there was a collision line of opponents. Maybe she really has a reason not to trust him, and the girl does everything right. At least in this situation, everything is very ambiguous. No one has ever found out which rumors about him are true and which are not. In any case, contacting him will do no good, especially if his goal is to use someone for his own purposes. Against all odds, Veronica said that she didn't want to go after him until he proved that he could be trusted and didn't have anything in his plans to hurt her. Sure, she thanked him for saving her, but that wasn't enough for a girl to agree to walk down the same path with him, much less a stranger. Veronica didn't understand how it could happen. She had never done anything like that before, but if you look at the guy at that moment, it was as if he had expected it and knew it could happen. He came a little closer to her and said that he seemed to have completely forgotten to mention one very important detail, which in all probability she might not like, or the girl would experience something like this. She can't refuse and now has to follow him whether she likes it or not. He realizes she has no reason to trust him, but unfortunately there is no other option. He reminded her that either she would shatter into little pieces and there would be nothing left of her, or she would go with him, trust, and not fight back, no matter what happened. At this point, he decided to give one last reminder and warning that if she wasn't with him or refused to cooperate, she would die much sooner than she thought, and he wouldn't say it again. It was up to her. Besides, he could manage without her too, and he had no desire to persuade her for a few more days. Of course, after such a thing, there is immediately want to agree, but at the same time, he said this phrase in such a tone that pride still requires to refuse and go their way. But reason suggests the opposite. It is better to stay close to him and do not do stupid things. But even in this situation, she still starts yelling at him, resists, and says that he should protect the weak. They kidnap and threaten, and if he's so strong, why is he begging her and wasting his time on it? He reminded her of something that had happened since the first seconds of their acquaintance. Moreover, he had told her about it more than once, and then uttered a phrase which is true, but at the same time seems so fantastic as to make it impossible to believe, namely, that as of yesterday, the girl is no longer weak. She is now a Bahamut, however much she may not like it, or like to admit it. And if that wasn't enough, He explained in other words to make it clear, she's a monster that feeds on the energy of dead people, and there's no way to fix it. Either she lives on in this business, or she refuses and dies right now, as he'd originally suggested. And since she herself has said several times that she wants to stay and die, it's not the best option. Accordingly, now she should only listen to him, no matter how it sounds. He's the man who saved her, instead of the god who disappeared. When suddenly he said another very strange phrase, as if he was sending her to hell, where she would realize that it would be better to agree and not to do, that she could do everything without him, Veronica only cried. How he kissed her again and decided to go there together, as if without her there is no point in being here and staying. The situation is very strange, but this attitude of his, it's very much like hidden feelings, which he is just afraid to admit. Right after the kiss, the two of them teleported to some other place. It's a snowy street where the Savior speaks his last words. As he said yesterday, all he needs from her is a simple thing. But since there were a lot of things she wasn't happy about, so be it. He wouldn't impose too much. Veronica began to step back and look around, as if realizing that she would be alone now. Of course, he was sorry to see her in such a situation, but it was the only way the girl would realize that he didn't really want anything bad for her, but on the contrary, she would be very comfortable and safer with him than to stay alone. Moreover, she was lucky that he left her alive and didn't give her up to that commander, as any man would have done in his place, not to risk spoiling his reputation. Veronica looks at the city and realizes that everything is lost. The monster has gradually and imperceptibly destroyed everything in its path, and she turns out to be the one who depends on it. One day or not, if nothing is done, there will forever be devastation. Cold and never a living soul will appear here. At the moment, Veronica has no idea what she is doing and what needs to be done. She only knows that a lot depends on her. But at the same time, she has neither the strength nor the desire to understand anything, especially when it comes to the monster and survival, as it is already known. She does not even have a partner who is the same as her. Even a savior cannot do as much as she does. It is impossible to convey in words how painful it is for her to look at the ruined city where she has lived all her life. Veronica walked all her childhood along these streets, knows where her house is, and can't believe that this is the end of the table and all this was done by some monster. She doesn't understand why exactly she has to do it. Besides, no one has explained anything to her. She doesn't know about her abilities, not even if she has them at all, and how she can defeat the monster, because at least he's 10 times bigger than she ate, and she doesn't know him enough to fight him somehow. She doesn't know his weaknesses or her advantages. At some point, when she had given up hope and just closed her eyes out of hopelessness, the guy came over and gave her a hug, and she felt the warmth that she needed right now. He is the only one she can more or less trust and count on for help. But at the same time, because of resentment and anger at the whole situation, she still can't relax and talk to him normally. Something inside as if forbids her to do so and to perceive him as a faithful partner. Of course, it's not without questions that she's been wondering all along. What's the real reason he not only saved her and gave her a chance to survive, but continues to care all along? To which he says that even though she is a monster, something inside him tells him that he should be there, and sooner or later the two of them can defeat the strongest enemy and rebuild this city from scratch. Accordingly, it's better for them to stay together, because in any case, it's much safer and safer together than alone. And since she's a girl and has never experienced something like this, it's natural that he wants to take care of her and be there for her to make her feel more comfortable. It was only after that that she seemed to warm to him a little, and thought that so far he hadn't done anything wrong. Well, as soon as he gave the slightest reason for suspicion in his direction, everything would change. Veronica thought that whatever your intentions were, they both needed each other, and she should use that to survive. Besides, if you do nothing and are afraid of everything, nothing will work. Things will only get worse and more dangerous. But if you take a risk, there is a chance to get to the best and do something useful. As long as she's alive and has the opportunity, you have to move in some direction. Otherwise, at the very least, you can just freeze in this cold. And if you make some movement, maybe it will lead to something better. Since they finally decided to become a team, a few days had passed because of this time. Surprisingly, they even managed to trust each other. The girl realized that she was wrong and even found the strength to apologize for her behavior. This time they had to go to some city on business, and judging by Veronica's reaction, it was her first time here, of course. She didn't refuse to go, because it was better than staying put. At least they'd be alone together. The city of Asseldorf, not far from her hometown where they had come from. The partner warned them right away that they would not be here long. They had a couple of things to do and could go back. The girl stopped and began to look around, and suddenly she felt a strong odor, which was impossible not to pay attention to. She began to listen, and this smell is clearly not the most pleasant. It caused a lot of thoughts and, of course, unpleasant emotions, because it could be anything and she has no idea what it means, because maybe it's time to run away from this place, which is very strange. But at that moment, she didn't even look under her feet, although she really should have, because everything was clear from the first seconds, and it was very similar to the last time she came to church, when suddenly someone touches her shoulder, just like that time when she saw the monster after that. It was an inexpressible sensation. She almost fainted, because after that incident, it is impossible to perceive such things normally. But actually it was her partner. He approached her very discreetly and just wanted to point out that she had a scar, but Veronica didn't even hear the word. She was so scared that she didn't take in what he said. In the meantime, they had begun to settle down in the house and put their things in their places. And then they thought it would be a good idea to take care of supper beforehand, so as not to go to bed hungry, for it was not yet known how safely the night would pass, for they might have to wake up early in the morning. And I need something to eat. So while it was still dark, they went outside and started to look for something. The guy constantly controlled her, because everywhere is very slippery. It is mountainous terrain, because of which you can easily fall and get hurt. I couldn't cook dinner in half an hour without her help, and he did very well. Then he just invited her over and offered to try something, and Veronica didn't even have time to notice how he did it. After a while, she felt sick for some reason, and the girl doesn't even understand how it's connected. She's not hungry anymore, and these feelings are strange. It all started right after she smelled that unpleasant odor. Then, as it was time to rest, he gave her his bag containing a sleeping bag. For a comfortable and warm sleep, the girl saw that he had one and asked why he would not take it for himself. The guy replied that she needed it much more than he did, as he was used to living in such conditions due to his occupation. It would not be difficult for him to spend the night without such facilities. After every such act on his part, Veronica can't help but think that such kindness on his part must mean something. As you know, when men are too polite, you should always suspect their intentions. They are much more cunning than they may seem, and it's very good that Veronica noticed it. It's all very nice, but it wouldn't hurt to find out if she's getting it right. In the meantime, when they had already warmed up the house a little and it was more comfortable to be here, sure enough, she approached him and decided that just in case, there were some things that needed to be clarified and discussed before there was some ambiguous, awkward situation, which she very much did not want to happen. She apologized if it was a strange question, but she asked if they'd have to share a bed, since she hadn't found a second one yet. The girl began to watch his reaction carefully. She was afraid that he would suddenly laugh and reply that she had made up too much of herself, except that he started to look at her as if Veronica had understood everything correctly, and it was very good that she had brought it up herself and was willing to discuss it. He immediately started smiling, but lightly, so as not to embarrass her too much and make her even more nervous. The guy carefully tries to hint that there's nothing wrong with it. Besides, in case she forgot, they've already kissed a few times and he sees nothing wrong. And then to sleep here together and, yes, in the same bed. Of course, she reacted to it as if she'd heard something crazy, though most likely, since she was letting him kiss her, it was somewhere in the back of her mind. The girl was very much okay with it. She just needed to show that it was at least a little surprising, as if she'd never once thought of anything like that before. As usual, the first emotion and behavior that she has unconsciously is complete denial. although she herself does not understand why she is so nervous because they have long been adults. Moreover, they have already kissed several times, and she has never pushed him away or even hinted that it was unnecessary. Accordingly, she has some feelings for him, and this guy is very cute to her. No matter how hard she tries to deny it, he's just amused to watch it, although she tries to somehow maybe smile as much so she doesn't feel awkward. It so happened that the two of them simultaneously began to recall that wonderful moment of kissing, after which it would be strange to deny and refuse to rest on the same bed. The guy looks at her and waits for her to finally realize that there is nothing wrong with it. And in general, that in this life, you should do only what brings pleasure, especially in such conditions, when it is not clear whether they will wake up tomorrow alive or not. Unlike her, the guy realized this a long time ago. He even admitted that he liked her, and in fact wanted to hear the same in return. In that case, since she didn't really want to talk about it, he didn't insist on anything, just suggested that she wash up and rest while he went to look around the neighborhood to get a better sense of direction and know where to run to, just in case. Of course, Veronica was much relieved. She was sure he would insist and draw out one word from her until he heard what he wanted. It was night. As Veronica was already asleep, he came back from his walk and of course lay down beside her. As there was no other place in the house, he thought that if she began to resent him early in the morning, he would be sure to explain everything and let her know that it was not very pleasant to sleep on the cold floor, and he did not want to get sick. Veronica is already dreaming, but at the same time she is anxious, and it is visible even now. She moves her hands and makes some sounds. She obviously doesn't like something. It turns out that the girl sees in front of her some new city, which is very beautifully glowing and looks like the happiest people live in it. There is incredible beauty everywhere, but she looks at it from afar, as if remembering the past happy life, realizing that such a thing will never happen again. And even if by some miracle she manages to save her hometown and even rebuild it, in the case of her parents, nothing will work. She will never see them again anyway. At one point, she felt a terrible sense of discomfort, as if she were a very good and kind person. But inside, something was forcing the destruction of all that she saw before her. She gets those same red eyes, and then the girl hears a man slowly creeping up on her and wanting revenge for all the things she's managed to do. In just a moment, she becomes a real monster, only in the body of a man who sees this stranger as just another dose of energy. She starts laughing very loudly, thus waking up the whole town. All the people would come out into the street, and by doing so, they made her even happier. The girl immediately wakes up. She feels a terrible chill all over her body and doubts if she even continues to live, realizing that she is half a monster, and there is no telling when he will manifest and start controlling her. But that's not the worst of it. The more Veronica thinks about it and feels that there's something evil in her, it's like she's unknowingly turning from that monster, and she's slowly starting to look towards her sleeping partner. She has horrible thoughts, as if all the things she did in the dream weren't enough. She needs more energy. But does she only get like this at night? One would hope that if one wakes up and has a chance to save herself, that they could remember how to help her. The girl very slowly starts to turn towards him. She checked if he was definitely asleep and started to take action. If she could really hurt him, and the guy didn't even realize it yet. It was strange that he didn't think about it beforehand and didn't take care of his own safety, because he knew exactly who he was staying with in the house for the night. But that's not the most interesting thing. If you watch what happens next, you'll notice that as soon as the guy starts to hear her and wakes up, her evil thoughts immediately disappear and she seems to regain consciousness because the girl is already very close to him. The guy notices it and she becomes very embarrassed because now he will think not what is happening in reality. She realizes that this is about to be a very awkward situation and doesn't know what to do to turn back the clock and not approach him at all. Veronica didn't even notice how he woke up and immediately started kissing her. He thought that this was what she wanted, so he took the initiative and reciprocated, and all to the point that she did not feel awkward and realized that he also wanted it. He said that he understood everything and offered to spend this night unforgettable, so that they would remember it for a long time, and remember with pleasant emotions. He certainly wondered very much why she had not been so bold tonight, and had only been able to show her desire at night when he was asleep. Only, at that very moment, the girl decided to ruin everything. She told him the truth, what she had dreamt, and what she wanted to do to him. The guy looked at her with surprised eyes and imagined what could have been if he hadn't woken up. Veronica confessed that she was a real monster who wanted to destroy a peaceful city and everyone who lived in it. The guy was very quick to recognize it and started to calm her down. He said it wasn't her and the dream. It was just her inner fear that someday it might become a reality. And there's nothing she can do about it, so don't blame yourself. And now it's better to just calm down, get a good rest. Since she hadn't done anything wrong yet, the girl was just very impressed and thought it was real. He had warned her that it could happen tomorrow night, and everyone had to be prepared for it. So she had to accept and realize that whatever she dreamed had nothing to do with reality, and she didn't have to be so afraid that she had to think about it all day long. Veronica really wanted to cry, but for some reason began to hold back her emotions, as if someone sees it, will immediately punish her. The girl is just used to this from childhood. So the guy took her hands, supported her, and asked her not to hide any emotion. She can cry freely, and in no case do not try to hide it. At this moment, the girl felt more strange than ever. All her life she had dreamed of hearing these words, but it so happened that she heard them from this man, whom she had known for no more than a few days. Even her own father had never said them to her. She does not cease to wonder that this man she still has considers suspicious, although on the other hand, he does everything possible to keep alive and to make the girl feel as comfortable as possible near him. In that case, since he was determined to support her, the girl admitted that it would be nice for him to reassure her like that every time. If she started to handle it on her own, it wouldn't work. She would only make it worse that way, and she can't stand it. If she has such a dream, he won't be there. It's all gone. She can only be strong with him. Berg was so overjoyed that she was finally able to trust him that of course he agreed and promised that he would always be there for her, even if the situation got out of hand. He would think of her first. On the one hand, it sounded like the words of a friend, but on the other hand, she took it as a hidden confession of feelings. If he didn't care about her, it wouldn't be the same anyway. For now, as long as the monster exists, they really should be as one. Whether it's because of the feeling or not, we can figure it out later. Right now, we need to think about safety and survival. And if they are comfortable being around each other like now, that's fine. As you know, in love and harmony, it's much easier to achieve something than with distrust and something like that. It took a very long time, but better late than never. Thus, they did not even notice how they started kissing and hugging for hours. The time flew by unnoticed. The morning is about to come. They are not bothered by this fact that they did not have time to rest, because they led this time with great pleasure, and this is the main thing. And yet they managed to get a few hours rest. Berg was the first to wake up. He started to look around to see if everything was safe and if there was any danger nearby. While he has a few minutes of free time, the guy started to think about the future plan and did not wake up the girl. While it was not necessary, it was better for her to rest, especially after a disturbing dream that took all her strength away from her. At some point, Veronica started saying some words, her father's name, and the guy immediately realized that she was dreaming about her family. She started to get very nervous, which means that the dream is not a pleasant one. In that case, he just moved closer and started stroking her face and did his best to make this moment a little easier for her. Maybe she'd even feel it through her sleep and be able to calm down. He also started to say some soothing words, because it's a hard day ahead, and he doesn't want her to wake up in a bad mood and not be able to do anything. Her strength is as valuable as gold. Since she had a few minutes to spare, he didn't bother her and let her rest longer. Berg could certainly worry about her a lot less, but until now, he still couldn't understand what it was that made him think about her so much more than he did about himself. It turns out that from the day he saw her for the first time, he felt that she was a special person, not only in this case, but in his life in general. Then he did not know how to explain it and thought it meant nothing. But as it turned out, Most likely it was love at first sight. He just felt it very quickly, more than ever before. In the meantime, the street is much brighter. There are even people on the streets. Everyone goes to work and does not even suspect that in the neighboring town is already a complete devastation. But for the sake of peace and locals, Berg decided not to upset them before the time, because they still have time to enjoy this life. He really hopes that they will avoid it. But how it will be in reality, they will know in time. Maybe they won't be affected by this horrible situation at all, and these two will deal with the monster much faster than anyone knows about it. At some point, during breakfast, the guy did not hold back and decided to give her a very significant and important gift, which will definitely be useful to her in the future, and maybe even in the near future. Veronica did not expect, and said that it was very hard for her to accept it and had nothing to give in return. The guy said it was a very necessary thing and she better not refuse, because as they had already noticed, as soon as she starts to doubt and disagree, in the end, she still has to do as he said. Besides, this item will definitely not be superfluous. When she started looking at it for a very long time and doubting whether to accept such a gift, the guy thought that she didn't like something and even decided to say that he could and take it back. He was a little upset that she didn't immediately like and appreciate his efforts, and yet he even found the strength to compliment her. He chose this gift because it matched her eye color perfectly. Of course, it is very pleasant to hear any girl. She does not even know what to say to this, because for all her life, heard compliments only from his side, no one else from anyone. On the contrary, she only escaped and everything possible, so that she has a very low self-esteem, as well as confidence in the new, that she is worse than others. At that moment, Veronica confessed that she had long dreamed of such an object, but never imagined that she would receive it as a gift in such a situation, and under such circumstances, when it was not just a dream, but a forced measure. Then, the guy noticed that she had put ointment on her scar, but because she hadn't smeared it on properly, it didn't work, so he offered to help, or if she didn't like that option now, she could do it herself. Veronica begins to be embarrassed, and surprisingly, even agreed to have him do it each time. She is no longer so afraid of his touch. The girl so begins to feel and get used to the care from a man, which had not managed to get earlier. The girl did not even notice how she stopped paying attention to everyone around. Initially, she was very afraid that she would be seen with this guy and start some rumors. Although in fact, and there is no matter about her personal life, they all just rest before the working day and quietly having breakfast. No one even looks in her direction. Veronica even tried to look at all these people, and again she was convinced that nobody cared about her. Everybody was busy with their own business, which meant that she could do whatever she wanted. Besides, most of them didn't even know her. It wasn't her hometown. She's literally here for a couple days. Accordingly, even if they see something or something unusual happens, everyone will forget it after a couple days and won't even know her name to tell who it happened to. Veronica didn't understand what he meant and asked what she had already done wrong. It turned out that she hadn't even touched her food, as if she was afraid to do it in front of him. He specially prepared a whole table of food and even started eating first to make her feel more comfortable. But she still didn't touch anything. Even though the guy knows perfectly well how hungry she is, they haven't eaten for more than a day. Any person would get very hungry during that time, and she pretends it's all normal. And as if to create an even more awkward situation, he reminded her of what had happened between them the night before and said that since she had used a lot of her strength, she needed to regain it. And finally, at least eat something. Otherwise, they just won't leave the table. Berg even suggested that maybe she doesn't eat anything because he paid for it. And since she doesn't have the money, she's probably just embarrassed to eat the food and can't admit it. As suddenly, she replies that all the more she won't touch or eat anything. If he continues to embarrass her on purpose, she explained that she dislikes it very much, especially when there are a lot of people around and someone might hear it. In the end, they stopped talking altogether. Veronica finally resented him. Although it's a bit wrong of her, the guy is trying to feed her, create all the conditions, and she still doesn't like something. It can get to the point where he just gets tired of trying and stops doing it. Then she'll feel like she missed out and it'll be too late to apologize. She doesn't notice how she's constantly making him feel guilty, but he still tries very hard and tries to ignore it. Even now, when he could have just gotten angry and gone about his business, he stayed and again, politely asked her to eat something. He reminded her that he didn't know when they would be able to do it again, so they should take the opportunity to eat enough to last a long time. Moreover, he even said a phrase which meant only that he was really to blame, though he was not. He said that if she would taste a single bite, it would be his greatest honor, though he ought not to have said it at all. If she did not want anything, being hungry, she herself would have apologized and understood that it was not worthwhile to refuse. She was silent again, just staring into his eyes, as if waiting for something else, wondering where the guy was getting so much patience, because anyone else in his place would have left her here long ago. A miracle happened, and Veronica finally started to eat her portion, and she did it so fast that even he did not eat at such a speed. Watching her, Berg cannot maintain a smile. He is very happy that he was able to persuade her. He even for a moment felt himself in the role of a father who makes his child eat. But that's not all. Veronica asked for another portion, because she realizes that she can eat just as much. She realized that she needs to eat very well, because really, no one knows when they will have such an opportunity, and if they will have it at all. She does it with great resentment, of course, but it's only to avoid admitting her guilt. Berg realizes this and barely holds back a laugh so she doesn't notice it. In the meantime, they had already returned to their temporary home, and Veronica had already done a little tidying up, which was not difficult for her, since at home she was used to pleasing her father and cleaning every room several times a day, so that everything was perfect and there was nothing to be faulted. As suddenly, a guy was passing by, and she and everyone noticed how she accidentally took his hand. Even he did not expect it. The guy asked what it meant, because she had never done that before. From Veronica's side, it looked like some kind of hint at least, so he thought. Of course, he liked this gesture very much. But as soon as he asked how long she would hold his hand, the girl seemed to regain consciousness and was very frightened. As she did it unknowingly, she became very ashamed and embarrassed at the same time. She started screaming very loudly as if he was the one who took her hand and got it all wrong. Berg had long been used to this behavior and just decided to react as calmly as possible so as not to cause a conflict. As suddenly, she just took her hand and felt a strange sensation. Veronica tensed up a lot, and she doesn't even know what it just was. The guy saw that something was wrong with her. She's clearly worried about something, although it looks like she's just suddenly thinking about something. But it's actually a lot more serious than it looks. He asked what happened and asked her to tell the truth, since he was the only one she could trust here. And besides, they had agreed not to hide anything and to trust each other. At first, Veronica couldn't even say a single word. She only whispered to explain that she felt very strange, as if there was some danger nearby. She didn't even bother to look into it or check. She just said that a monster had come. Berg hadn't expected that and asked if she was wrong. He doesn't understand how it's possible, because according to his calculations, the monster couldn't have been here before a few months. But according to Veronica, it's already here somewhere, and they must respond immediately to protect the locals and themselves, and most importantly, destroy it. In just a minute, they have already heard terrifying sounds that say that all the people are trying to run away from him. They are screaming and struggling to escape. They have also heard the request for help, and not just one. Some of them have already suffered, unfortunately, which means that they need to act now. The sooner they start fighting it, the less people will be affected. The best thing they can do right now is turn the monster's attention to themselves so that it stops chasing people. But for now, they're just watching it from the sidelines and can't believe that it's already here, just a few meters away. Berg is so surprised that he stares at the huge wall. He thought, theoretically, no monster could penetrate through it. As suddenly, he looked exactly where the two of them were hiding and looked up at him. The monster began to approach and walk as if it was looking for just them. As soon as he looked into Veronica's eyes and saw the color red, she knew there was no turning back. She had to do something, but she had no idea what to do. The only thing she wanted to do was run away and hide somewhere safe. In just a second, she had a vision and realized how he had gotten into this city. If through the huge wall he had no chance of appearing here, then it was obvious. He had entered through the dungeon. She told the guy right away because maybe this information would help him somehow. She tried to find out more, but so far, there was no information. Accordingly, he has a question about how many of the same monsters they can expect in the near future. But unfortunately, Veronica can't answer that question yet. She can assume that if all these sensations are from Bahamut, the main monster, then there are enough of them to fill the entire city. And the possibility, soon there will be dozens, maybe hundreds of them. She suggested that she should report this to the Night Order right away. They would know exactly what to do. It would be extra help. At least she thought so. The guy replied that it was not a good idea, because if they waited for the Knights, it would be too late. This problem should be solved inside the city and not rely on anyone else. At that moment, she asked him the most important, and at the same time, the strangest question of all, whether he could save this city, although most likely Berg has no idea if he could save even the two of them, let alone anyone else.